Never mind the ballots. Spring Statement Special. With us now is Gareth Davies, the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Gareth, defence spending up, deregulation, welfare cuts, slashing the size of Whitehall. This is the stuff the Tories spent years dreaming of doing, and a Labour government's delivering it.
I'm not sure I'd quite characterise it like that. The OBR have cut growth in half. And
yeah,
we had,
well, it wasn't exactly bumping along above more than about 2% under the Tories, was it?
We had a really tough time in the last Parliament with global shocks. The Chancellor likes to talk about global shocks, but not COVID and the war in Ukraine, which we had to deal with. But look, this is a really troubling state of affairs. We've got debt up. Debt interest is going to be up 30 billion over the course of the
More than a
Parliament.
combination of defence spending and policing.
For sure. And
just to service the interest of the debt.
And let's look into the detail of the defence spending, which obviously we want to see more defence spending. We've made that very clear.
So that's a tick. We like defence.
Well, we do, but look at how they're doing it, right? So they've cut international aid, that's 2 billion, but that's from day-to-day spending, moving money to defence capital spending. So it's not actually day-to-day spending that's going up for defence, it's capital, which is one-off, it's stuff, it's not day-to-day spending. So, there's more to do there for sure, but you need a growing economy. You need unemployment to be going down. You need debt to be under control and debt interest to be under control as well. And I'm afraid, as a result of the autumn budget, we are not in that situation. The OBR have upgraded some of their forecasts based on the October budget, but a lot of the time, actually, they're bringing them back to the forecast we had in the March budget last year, which was our budget. So I'm not sure I would be going around high-fiving people if I was Rachel Reeves right now.
Well, Darren Jones says they've knocked it out of the park. It's all going brilliantly. What about deregulation, though? Again, something the Tories spent years talking about, not least on planning, and then ran into their the local concerns in their nice leafy seats. You're going to welcome this, right?
So I completely accept.
0.6% of GDP growth, thanks to Labour's planning bill.
I completely accept. Look, maybe it makes me a bad politician, but I'll agree with them when they do something right. They're not doing a lot right, but on planning, they are doing something right, and we perhaps should have gone a bit further. The OBR have scored the planning reforms pretty generously in this outlook. But I will just say on deregulation, you can't have pro-growth deregulation while at the same time you've got anti-growth taxation. And the reality is, we started today with the Rachel Reeves about to break her fiscal rules because she had to find £14 billion to cover, right? And that's why we've been calling it an emergency budget, because she's had to cut things like the civil service, she's had to cut welfare.
The welfare bill. Well, you had 12 billion quid's worth of cuts in the Tory manifesto last July. They found 6. You reckon there's another 6 in there without putting some of the hardest suffering people in this country into poverty?
We think you should always have a welfare system that protects the most vulnerable. Of course you could, and those who are not able to work, you have to protect them and make sure they're okay. But there are a lot of people, millions of people who can work, who should work. There are millions of people who can work and want to work, actually. And you've got to make sure that you put in place a system where you protect the most vulnerable, but you create an environment where jobs are created. And I'm afraid, under this government, as the figures show today by the OBR, unemployment is going down. And we know this is not a surprise, because if you talk to any business out there, they will tell you they're being hit with a national insurance contribution tax rise. They were told that it wouldn't happen. They were promised that it wouldn't happen, and it's hitting their bottom line. By the way, not just businesses, it's hospices, it's GP services. We can get onto that another time. But they've also got, if you're a high street business, if you're a pub, restaurant, your rates relief has gone down from 75% to 40%. That's gone up. You've got a national living wage, which is a good thing, but that's going up in the context of all of these additional costs. And that is why growth has been hit this year by the OBR. It's been cut in half because of that impact.
And then, bringing in Ashley, the other unexploded bombshell underneath the economy is this workers' rights bill, the Employment Act, written in cahoots with the unions. Darren Jones there earlier saying it's all brilliant, but they haven't actually scored that in here. That's presumably going to be an issue.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's been described as the dynamite within the OBR's document because, as you say, the budget has already made it much harder to recruit for people, and actually those flexible jobs have become a lot more expensive, which is actually the first way that people often get jobs out of being out of work, because they don't have the structures around them to go to full-time employment. But that make work pay, we had Darren Jones saying that it was always just big employers that was targeting, the big companies, but it's not, is it? And I mean, where do you kind of land on that? Because it's surely only going to make life harder for the government in terms of looking at that productivity as well.
For sure. I mean, again, you've got to look at all of these measures in the context of, economy that is in decline, increased regulation, increased taxation. If you are a business of 5 or 6 people, you're going to be hit. If you're an employer like Tesco, the biggest employer in the country, you're going to be hit. And that is going to result in less jobs being available. So they say they want to tackle the welfare budget, but those people have got to get back into work. Yeah. And if you've got an economy in decline and unemployment rising, that is not a good combination. And the fact that the OBR have not scored the employment rights bill suggests that these growth forecasts are highly uncertain.
So you don't, I mean, look, we've all been here. You were in the Treasury for a while. You're now in the opposition Treasury. The OBR come along every 6 months. They upgrade it, they downgrade it. We have this complete ridiculous facade where we go, oh, now the headroom's this, now the headroom's that. It's just nonsense, isn't it? We just do it every 6 months. We go around this great big charade, up the hill, down the hill. At some point, is someone just going to say, why are we doing this?
Well, the reason the OBR was created was when we came in.
It was a political gimmick to George Osborne to have something to say.
You call it a gimmick. We put it in place to try and protect against the rising deficit that we inherited. By the way, by the time we left office in 2024, we'd cut the deficit in half.
You're outsourcing the setting of economic policy to a bunch of economists from the Resolution Foundation who remarkably end up going back into the OBR, and then they leave the OBR and they go back to the Resolution Foundation. I think there's a case to be answered that the creation of the OBR was one of the stupidest things the Tories did, and you're going to live to regret with that.
Well, first of all, the OBR does not set policy. It is up to the Chancellor.
Well, it sets the guardrail.
But it
marks the homework pretty viciously.
And had the OBR not said that you're going to wipe out your headroom, then the Chancellor wouldn't have had to make even bigger welfare cuts.
Yeah.
She's having to react to what the OBR
Who are these guys? Who voted for the OBR? Who elected these people?
They are a check on the government, and I would argue that while some do, of course, say that their powers are too great, in this scenario, the transparency that they're providing into the folly of this Labour government is quite helpful for shows like this, because I can tell you that growth is forecast to go down because of their measures, and that absolutely matches what businesses tell you and I out there in the real economy, that this is having a real life impact. Now, it's our job to translate what the OBR are saying and forecasting. Forecast the forecast, I will say.
Yeah, I mean,
right? And you do have to operate within that, but it is a guardrail, essentially against these socialist governments who typically increase debt, increase taxes, increase spending.
Sorry, what did your not socialist conservative government do? Increase debt, increase inflation, increase taxes. The highest tax burden on history didn't start under these guys; it started under you.
So let me deal with that directly. We did have those different factors go up because of the pandemic, and we had to deal with these global factors. Now, Rachel Reeves likes to talk about global factors. She did.
Boris Johnson was putting up national insurance before the pandemic.
She's right. She's right to know that's not true. It was in response to pay down the debt for COVID. But we absolutely have to manage the economy, mindful that things can change in the world and events can affect your domestic economy. That's why you don't blow out your headroom as she did in the autumn budget. It's why you don't overexpose yourself to bond markets by extending the debt, which she has done. We're going to be paying now, as a result of today, £30 billion more in debt interest. I think that's half the education budget because of this government's increased debt.
Ashley, what are the markets doing? I mean, there was a little bit of a wobble in the middle of it. But long-term borrowing for the United Kingdom is now more expensive than it was when these guys got Liz Truss out.
Absolutely. And I mean, so the yield on government bonds is about 4.7%, so it's extremely high. And the problem is, as we all know, that every pound that's placed on debt interest costs, like us paying off our credit card, means that they can't spend it on better things, right? And the problem is that there was this wobble, do you remember in January, where we were wondering what's the fate of Chancellor Rachel Reeves? Is she even long for this world? It just hasn't come back down. It's a bit nervy, but
is that a reflection on the confidence of Britain itself, or are we just getting caught up in the sort of Trump nervousness around tariffs?
So yes, the bond markets have had a sell-off kind of globally, but the UK has been specifically affected first in the start of the year, and it hasn't recovered in the same way that others have. So we're kind of like caught in a limp situation at the moment.
They're assessing this situation, I think. I'm always told as a politician you shouldn't comment on markets, but let me just break that rule right now. I'm not going to comment on market movements, but I think what those investors out there are nervous about is our exposure to things like tariffs from Trump coming in.
Yeah.
And I think the OBR have said that today.
Another 0.6% off growth if we do get into tariffs. And they're coming down the track.
And the fear, I suppose,
week.
as well is kind of the setting of targets and what Labour is saying about, we're going to get growth kind of by the end of Parliament. Who knows what's going to happen kind of on Global Tariff Day in 2 days' time? That could shoot everything to pieces. So those kind of long-term projects.
A lot of the projects, by the way, like Heathrow, we've said, look, we provisionally support these measures. These are things that, will help grow the economy. But to your point, they're long time in the distance. What is hurting people right now in businesses is the measures as a result of the autumn budget. And, hoping on the never, never, is kind of
What do Tories
difficult.
do, though? I mean, you're fairly screwed still, because regardless of what your opinions of this government, you have, barely 120-odd MPs. You're not going to be able to force a turnover. In fact, the opposition to this stuff isn't going to be coming from you guys. It's going to be coming from the Labour Party, right?
I think Labour Party is in a very difficult position at the moment internally. They're clearly, the welfare cuts that were announced, was it last week or the week before? They were delayed and delayed and delayed because there was internal disagreement, I think at the cabinet level, we don't know for sure, about what should be annount.
Must be refreshing to talk about infighting being on somebody else's side. Yeah?
Hey, I did the politics, don't you?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. But we are very united as a party in terms of bringing down welfare and growing our economy. And I think Labour are going to have some difficult decisions to make internally when they come to voting. I mean, we had one this week, Harry. National Insurance Contribution Bill came back to the House from the Lords about taxing hospices and children's hospices.
And it will sail through. You don't have the numbers to defeat this government. So what are you going to do other than make lots of noise?
Well, fortunately, we come on great shows like this to communicate to the general public
enough of that.
about how damaging their policies are going to be and when the election comes.
You're back to being a politician now. Gareth Davies, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Thank you for joining us. Never mind the ballots. Right, plenty more coming up.